Welcome to episode 40 of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men the Animated Series weekly recap podcast. I'm Rod. Welcome to part 2 of Sanctuary / Asteroid M. Not really Asteroid M.
I'm JC, and Rod is skipping to later in the script. So thanks for that, Rod. Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series. We're going back and watching every single episode of the original 1992 X-Men the Animated Series and their original intended script order as we build up to the release of X-Men 97, which is coming to Disney Plus in the latter part of 2023, which means after we get through the end of the series, we're going to have to do a different series like X-Men Evolution or Wolverine and the X-Men or that anime that's on Netflix.
I've seen the anime, so I'm excited about seeing that. I actually have the DVDs of that. I haven't seen the other ones, Evolution or Wolverine. So
I know Wolverine's supposed to be good. I've heard people say Evolution is, so.
Yeah. That's the one with the Goth Rogue, right?
Yes, it has Goth Rogue.
Okay. That'll be interesting for me because I still have this Rogue seared into my head. I'm open to other iterations.
You really don't have a choice because we're not going to not post for 6 months.
Wait, someone take like a half-year break?
No.
Okay. Anyway, so quick reminders.
Rod's drunk.
Yeah. Coffee and a Pepsi Zero here. So we're a recap show about a series that came out 27 years ago. There will be spoilers. If you don't want to spoil it for you, pause the podcast, watch the episode, and come back. We'll do our best to avoid mentioning anything about future episodes we haven't covered yet. Hopefully, you've at least watched the last episode. This is part 2. We're currently not sponsored by or affiliated with Disney or Disney Plus in any way, but hey, they have the episodes in order now, so they have that going for them.
Don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. And of course, make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast services. Finally, we record these episodes in batches, so if we're reacting to any news about the upcoming series, we will be behind. Literally, that's all we got.
Yeah, I guess there was a follow-up post from Ryan Reynolds about Wolverine and Hugh Jackman, but it was just basically hearing Wake Me Up Before You Go by Wham.
You literally could have said that on the last episode, right? You didn't have to save that to be another week later in real time.
I'm trying to spread the news. Anyway, now onto the show. Today we're going to be talking about Season 4, Episode 4, titled Sanctuary, Part 2. It aired on October 28th, 1995, and currently sits at a 7.8 star rating on IMDb.
It went up compared to compared to the previous episode.
I guess there's resolution in this one. I don't know.
There were fewer cameos.
Yeah, that's true.
We didn't have the Italian mutant.
There we go. So this episode picks up just like the moment that the last episode left off at, which is interesting because sometimes these shows we've seen in the past, they'll actually recreate part of the last episode like slightly different, but this one is literally that moment. So it's the X-Men running away from literally every other mutant on Asteroid M.
Yeah, because the impression, in case for some reason you're starting on this episode and didn't watch the previous one, which is a weird choice, but we'll respect it, is that, they think that it was actually Gambit, Beast, and Xavier who jettisoned Magneto's quarters as an escape pod. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which...
I love not only to not question that, but also not a single one of those mutants, considering you have almost every mutant on Earth, or at least a good portion of them.
You have some.
On the asteroid that didn't just do the math of okay, so we have a psychic, a hairy blue guy, and a guy who can charge cards. Or we have a person that we know can power, depower Magneto. Which was the more likely situation that happened?
And ironically, a lot of them view Magneto as their savior, too. So it's not like Cortez has been their leader or something like that.
Anyway, so as they're running away, Beast quotes, "Feet don't fail me now," which we had to do a little research on. We found out it was a black actor from the 20s named, it's spelled Stepin, but it's pronounced Stephen Fetchit, who said it in a lot of his movies where he was running away from cops. So I'm not sure of the entire context of all that, but it seems like at least come from racial tension in that era.
Yeah, or even just the whole idea of being blamed for something that you were not actually guilty of in any way.
And then running from the officials.
Yeah, because I had heard that phrase, but I want to say the first time I had heard it was probably a Looney Tunes or something like that. Because I unfortunately don't know the works of 1920s movies and such. But I've heard the phrase before and it stood out to me. Mm-hmm. So we did a little bit of digging, and then it's like you talk about sophisticated writing with deep cuts.
Yeah.
I think a 1920s actor who said this with this kind of connotation is the deepest of cuts that we've seen, at least so far, and known about, aside from Shakespeare and shit.
Yeah. And this is a kind of a cool reference, or at least a little mini lesson, because me personally, I wish I could remember the TikTok channel, but it's TikTok, so nobody remembers specific accounts. But there's one specific
certainly not Cyclops IWFM Pod.
Yeah. But there's this one count that I come across a lot where they teach things that we say innocently in everyday phrases now that actually have roots in they're almost always racist.
Yeah, there's a phrase that I used to say that I never had any indication had a racial undertone to it, and I've stopped saying it from my daily life because of learning about stuff like that.
So they're running away from the rest of the mutants on Asteroid M. They get to the human astronauts that are there, and they're like, "No time to explain. Come with us if you want to live."
Yeah, it is straight up a "come with us if you want to live" moment.
So Gambit offers to hold everyone off while they escape. Beast says, like, we might not be able to come back get you, and Gambit's like, well, I guess I'll be the first mutant in space. We're like,
yeah, be the first X-Men in orbit.
It's like, ooh.
Because, I mean, they've already been in space.
That's true.
This would just be him being jettisoned, floating around the Earth as a corpse.
So the rest of the X-Men get away while Gambit's like kind of doing his best to hold everyone else off. But Amelia turns into Mist, and this is when I learn what her powers are. She turns into Mist and then like disarms Gambit. They do catch up with the X-Men. Beast sees them. He's like, well, Gambit's not with them, but it's too late. So they close the airlock and they get the fuck out of there.
Yep.
We see like this master shot of outer space, and for whatever reason, Asteroid M is like a PNG cutout just like floating across the frame.
That is not how animation works,
I don't know how to
Rod.
explain it. It's just like it's like one static image over a static background that's just like sliding across the screen.
We're going to blame Saban for that one.
Yeah.
But you do get the psychic connection between Charles and Magneto, like, lets him know he's like, I'm alive.
Yeah, he clearly says, I live.
Yeah.
The only two words he says, with emphasis as well. I have some commentary about this later. Not too long from now, like a few points from now. I think it's funny that like Magneto goes out of his way in his kind of not dying words, but like last communication to Xavier to let him know that he's alive specifically.
Yeah, it's not like the spirit of my revolution. He's like, no, I'm alive.
Yeah. And so then we're back on Earth. We see Rogue that's at like with the space control center or whatever, and she knows the protocol. She's like, they're all getting ready for a crash landing.
Yep.
And she sees the shuttle on its way back down to Earth and tries to stop it. She doesn't quite like.
Well, it's literally too hot for her.
Yeah. Which is funny, like that of all of her shit. You never consider like some of these basically Superman power sets and stuff.
Right.
Like, what do you feel in that? Like, I'm sure it's like not painless, but like, so for her, it's like maybe it's a little bit strenuous, but it was the heat. She's like, oh, it's still hot.
Also, wears gloves. Those gloves definitely wouldn't survive that. They would have literally just melted off of her hands. Yeah.
But she does like slow it down enough so that a crash lands safely so people are alive when they
land. Bounce though. I just want to point out, like, if you look at the animation, it physically bounced as it hit the ground.
It was a rubber space shuttle.
That's how we're gonna get back from Mars.
Right.
Yeah.
And Rogue immediately just starts tearing into it like a tin can.
Yeah, she rips the door off.
Like, where's Gambit? She's just fuck all for anybody else on that shuttle. She's looking for Gambit. I can't tell if she's just like, she misses him and like is worried for his life, or is just wanting to make sure he's not banging some space chick.
If there was an X-Men who was going to try to get laid on a crashing ship, it would be him.
Yeah.
I don't agree with your thought process, Rob, but I can't say it's not 100% invalid.
Because she's like, where's Gambit? Where's Gambit? It's like, now what? Anyway. And Xavier tells Rogue, well, he's still on the asteroid. And Rogue interrupts. She's like, I knew it. He was trying to like leave and abandon us or whatever. And then Xavier's like, no, he sacrificed himself so we could get here, which is a horrible way to tell someone that, like, because he's still alive.
Yeah.
It's like, have you ever seen that joke where someone posts like, Susan and I are no longer dating, and then it's like Susan comments like, Steve, that's a terrible way to tell people we got married. Like,
no, I haven't, but that's amazing.
It's like a similar energy. It's like, yeah, he sacrificed himself so we could make it to the ship. It's like, sacrifice? He's like, no, he's still alive.
Yeah, it's like you could say he stayed behind.
And especially Xavier, who's, he's able to like psychically tell that he's still alive too.
Right, but we also know Xavier is awful with social cues.
That's true. And the only thing missing here is Cyclops yelling at somebody. They make up for it later. And then Rogue is like, well, we got to go back and get him then. And Xavier's like, well, I'll have to wait a few hours. I got to go speak to the president.
I love that this dude could literally just launch himself back into space and like in a few hours.
Yeah.
That's aggressive.
And this is one of those times where like I can actually see both sides of this. Rogue is like, well, if we don't know how long he's going to survive, we should go now. But at the same time, we do have like the world leaders that are all pointing all their weapons of mass destruction and stuff into outer space. So it's like, fair enough, we should go like at least let them know what's going on so we have a chance. Back on the asteroid, Cortez has the Genosian collar on Gambit and is presenting him to the other mutants as the traitor. The other mutants, like the mob of mutants, are like, kill him, and Cortez says that he wants to keep him alive long enough to convince him to join them.
Which I don't necessarily understand Cortez's motivation of why you would see that as a win.
Yeah.
Because then you're just welcoming a traitor into your midst as your best case scenario.
Yeah. Like, the only thing I could think of was that maybe this was a thing to show that he's like a little too chicken shit to be a leader, like he's not going to just like off somebody. I
don't know. I get the impression that he would, like, he literally offed Magneto.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's a little bit of confusion with his motivation there, but plot point.
And then back on Earth, even though everything's urgent, they need to meet with the president or whatever, the X-Men take the time to have a funeral for Magneto.
Yes. And we see Wolverine has joined them at this point.
Yeah. Professor Xavier gives this really weird eulogy, which, I'll actually appreciate a little bit, because I'm always a little like conflicted, when you're at like eulogies or funerals or whatever, because everyone always has only good things to say about someone, and fair enough, respect.
Not
the dead.
me.
Yeah.
I will give some roast during a eulogy if I need to, sir.
But fair enough, because you're respecting the dead or whatever. But like, not everyone was a saint. Statistically, most people aren't. And so it's just interesting, specifically in this case, where like, even though he may have had noble intentions in the general broad aspect, he's directly been a problem for the X-Men and like
humanity.
Yeah, and tried to end multiple people's lives. But Professor Xavier kind of acknowledges that. He's like, yeah, I've abhorred his methods.
Yep.
But respect to the man, like, okay, cool. Kind of at least an honest eulogy. But in this, we see flashbacks of Magneto's origin.
Yeah, they refer to it as the tragic past. And that's the first time, though it doesn't go as far as saying Germany, it does not show a swastika or specifically a German soldier. It is so heavily implied that this is the first time we've gotten that far with it within the context of this series.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like if you're even vaguely aware of like world history at that point, like you recognize what they were showing.
Yeah. He also says, I tried to help him, I failed. He takes a little bit of responsibility himself that he couldn't turn Magneto around. He basically wants to spare future generations from having to go through this cycle of violence that he and Magneto had to live through.
Mm-hmm. And they both had like differing views on like how that could play out, which, fair enough. Nobody can tell the future here yet.
Right.
Then back on the asteroid, Cortez has Gambit back at his quarters and is torturing Gambit to quote unquote confess about sending Magneto into space. And Amelia arrives just in time to see all this happening and stops him from hurting Gambit more.
What's funny to me is he's saying you need to confess. And it's like, the argument isn't you need to confess. It's just take the blame because I'm not going to let you, like, it needs to be more bargaining rather than confess. Like like Gambit knows that Cortez released him.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't need to confess because I literally didn't do this. So again, I think Cortez is just unhinged.
Yeah.
And that's why like certain aspects of logic don't exist for this character, because he's already just so like, he's Magneto on Magneto's worst day.
Yeah. And he actually at this point, he's kind of trying to like mass gaslight everyone back to like even himself. To your point, he's one of those, I've known a few people like this who once they hear the words, whether they know they're true or not, that's like a good enough completion of status for them. So like so it might even be for him, it's like if Gambit says he did it, then it's off it's Cortez's conscience too. Because obviously all the mutants already believe that it was Gambit, so how much more is that going to add?
Yeah. You could deny it all you want, but he's like, you want the false confession because that makes you feel less guilty or something.
So then Cortez leaves and broadcasts to Earth. So there's a lot of cameos here. I don't think I recognized anyone. I thought I'd seen the Ancient One, but I'm not too familiar.
So we have 3 cameos at this point. As Cortez is giving his speech to the leaders of Earth, you see that X Factor is watching. Mm-hmm. The one who I think you're assuming is the Ancient One is actually Gideon, who is an X-Men known character. And then there's a woman, and it looks kind of like an Egyptian. The character's name is Haven. I don't know a lot about her.
Okay.
If she's been in the comics recently, it hasn't been in the issues I've been reading. Mm-hmm. But she was actually a fairly new one for me. I think it was very similar to, back in an earlier season where there was like the Senate committee hearing and you saw like GW Brig and War Machine. I think it was just, let's just add in more flavor to this world kind of scenario.
This is nice, like kind of forethought. Like, yes, not all the superheroes are just European and American.
Right.
The last one we see watching in this like montage is the president, President Kelly, is watching, and I love this. This had to have been on purpose. He calls Cortez a tin horn dictator. I was like, that had to have been, because that's the kind of thing you pull in like the 90s on Fox Kids, like when the Animaniacs had not actual prints, but they animated prints into the episode, and they were like, oh, fingerprints. You're like, nah, like adult jokes like that.
I totally didn't get that.
Oh, really?
I got it more on like the way that Kelly talks. It was very much that like, Kennedy vibe.
Okay, I can see that, yeah.
And Kennedy always had really interesting emphasis on his phrasing.
Yeah.
So I got it as like a bad Kennedy impression rather than...
I could see that, though. Yeah. It was just funny because, at least to me, it was the emphasis, and then maybe I just wrote this in my head. There's like that little pause, like, that tin horn dick, tater.
Yeah, but essentially he's basically saying, like, everybody on Earth needs to fuck off. Mm-hmm. Just let the mutants live in peace, or we're going to retaliate.
Yeah. And
of course, Genosha pushes back on that.
Yeah. Yeah, because the president is in, presumably, the White House, and then all the other UN leaders are like on monitors behind him.
Which is also weird because you have like UN representatives as opposed to other presidents.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, because like the president isn't going to address the UN. It's usually your UN representative addresses the other UN. I don't know. But
I don't know how this world works.
Yeah, I don't know politics.
But all the world leaders kind of unanimously agree that they want to attack. But Xavier says, like, we should still try to talk to him, which I feel like Xavier has, like, less of an argument now. Even though we've seen what's been going on back on Earth, they just, like, it was quiet for a while, and then missiles.
Yes.
So they're like, well, that obviously didn't work. And then Xavier says, well, it's either we talk to him or it's all out nuclear war. So, take your pick. Back on the asteroid, Cortez is just egging on all the mutants. It's just more of like the little dictator thing. He's just getting everybody all riled up about the humans back on Earth.
Right. And Amelia sees this and she essentially like realizes how foolish it is. It's like he's doing a more aggressive version of what she complained about Charles.
Yeah.
Because she was saying, well, you're the reason that we can't live on Earth in peace. And now he is antagonistically going after all of Earth's leaders. So, you already got us off this planet. Where do we go if they blow up this rock?
Right. She's like, yeah, we had a chance of being like left alone out here. And now it's no possible way.
Right.
So she's pissed off at that. So she goes to see Gambit and talk to him. And she's like, is what you're saying true? Did you really not do it? And Gambit is like, not going to say anything, but have you ever wondered how Cortez got there first when his room's all the way on the other side of the asteroid furthest away from Magneto's?
It's true.
It's like, yes. Also, let's think about the power sets, like I said before.
Yeah. And at that point, Amelia also kind of hints that other acolytes are in doubt of Cortez already as well. It's not just her by herself.
Because powers aside, just as a person, just seeing how this man has acted in public is like, that's enough to set off a few red flags, or at least some warning signs,
Yeah, and I mean, they've only been up here for
like a day.
Yeah. like this isn't the scientists who've been up there and have been getting stuff going. This is literally like, you guys haven't even gone to bed yet, probably. Yeah, and he's already starting like, a possible nuclear war with the planet. Yeah. No, this isn't nuclear war with a country. He's starting nuclear war with a planet.
And they're pretty close too. Like in proximity.
Yeah.
They're like in another galaxy. They're like within blast range.
They're closer than the moon is how I got the impression of distance. Because it's circling Earth's atmosphere. It's not like, it's definitely not past the moon. Maybe at best it's the same distance as the moon, but it's not too far off.
Yeah. So anyway, he's not thinking about any of this. Amelia, it's enough for her to like look into it. So then she, whatever you call it, smokes myths or whatever, into like another like secure part of the building to go look for information.
Right.
Then we see the Blackbird is heading towards the asteroid.
Yep.
Professor Xavier's in like a cyber suit or something.
Yep. So that suit was first seen in the crossover event that was called Fatal Attractions.
Okay.
So Fatal Attractions, for those of you who don't know, it is Shi'ar tech that is consistent. But in that one, it's very much the like, shit's about to get really real between Wolverine and Magneto. There's an infamous scene where in that series, they rip the adamantium off of Wolverine's bones.
Oh, yeah.
It's truly like, it's a memorable moment, not necessarily a good kind of memory.
Yeah.
That's where Professor X wore that suit for the first time in the comics.
I was wondering about that because I was like, in this episode specifically, like it doesn't really pay off specifically other than it's like another outfit.
it's an outfit that gives him the ability to walk.
Yeah.
That
okay. But he doesn't do that in this episode.
He doesn't end up needing to, but that is what it essentially does, is it gives him use of his legs.
And Wolverine is also in a different outfit. It's like a black and purple outfit.
Yeah, and also Rogue is in a different outfit too. So the suits that we're seeing there were actually tied to the toy line, and there were figures that had light up functionality, and those were their outfits that were there, at least according to what I could find online. What's interesting is years later, you would see that version of Wolverine's suit again when Wolverine was a part of X-Force, when it was the Rick Remender run of X-Force, where the entire team was a black, gray, white tone to their outfits.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Much like that with the 2000s X-Men movies.
No. No. When I say like, it wasn't like the leather, it was like just gray tones and stuff like that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, actually a Deadpool figure that's up on the shelf over there. Yeah, I'll take a picture of that. We need more Instagram fodder. That was from that era.
Is that the one that Deadpool's wearing in Ryan Reynolds' announcement of Deadpool 3?
No, the gray Deadpool outfit, though, is a reference to Deadpool 2 when he got all grayed out when he was burned. But that was a reference to the Remender-style outfits. Okay. So, in essence, no, but yes.
Okay.
All because of toys.
Yeah. Why not? Yep. And so the Blackbird is arriving to the asteroid in stealth. Like, the asteroid can't tell it's landing. Wolverine cuts a door into the asteroid. Around the same time, Amelia is in the room where I guess they're storing physical copies of the security tapes and sees the one that she's looking for is missing. She's like, that's sus.
Yes, that is her reaction.
Yeah. And then we see Beast going into where like, all the missiles are being stored. And he disarms one and then says, only 249 to go. And I'm like, how long do you think you have? Granted, it didn't take him that long to disarm the one, but that moment times 250 sounds like a lot longer than whatever this like coup they're trying to stage is going to take.
I mean, you also don't know that somebody's going to launch every missile at once.
Yeah,
you could get lucky. Maybe you've only disarmed 10, and you hit rocket number 1, and they're like, wait, what the fuck? Why didn't Why didn't that go off? And then it blows up inside an asteroid.
And then in this montage, we see Cortez in his quarters. He's like watching his own porn of himself or something.
Looked like he had like an augmented reality thing where it was him seeing himself in like positions of power. Yeah. It was very much mental masturbation, no doubt. But I don't think it was full-fledged porn.
Yeah. I joke about that because it's like it was mostly like him with women, models, and stuff. And so then we hear what presumably was Amelia calling like a fake emergency and causes him to leave. And then she smokes into the room and finds the tape that was missing that she was looking for, and she starts watching it. Cortez arrives where the emergency was called, and he's like, I told you not to call me unless it's an emergency, and dude's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I didn't call anything.
Yeah. And then he gets suspicious, and he doesn't have enough. He gets like half a second to be suspicious of it, and then Rogue and Wolverine like break into the room and start attacking.
Quick note. In that scene, when Wolverine pops up, that's the first time he says anything the entire episode.
Ah, that's true.
Like, I was very keenly aware that up until that point, he hadn't said anything, and I wondered if they were going to go to the full episode with just him being animated but not speaking.
Yeah.
And then after that, he did start speaking, but it was like literally they got past the halfway mark, and he had appeared in like 3 different shots and had not said a word up to that point.
He's like, nobody's noticed my outfit yet.
But the first thing he says is and I was like, are they just going to use a clip from a previous episode? And then he does actually say a brand new phrase and stuff, but I was just like, okay, that was a choice. They spent all the money on the new animation for the toy. Yeah. But they're like, we're not going to have them speak.
And then those two get attacked.
More acolytes show up.
Yeah. And Cortez says, well, we're going to throw Wolverine and Rogue into space now.
My favorite thing is Rogue being hit really hard into a ceiling or a floor. In this case, it's the ceiling.
Leaving it.
And a body imprint is left there to just show how strong she is. Like, because anybody else, if you were getting hit into something that is like a metal of that kind, like they would splatter out. Rogue dents it because of how strong her body is.
It would be like the boys in like any character.
Yeah, pretty much.
When they land on something, it's like, Back on Earth somewhere on a desert, we see Magneto's like escape pod room or whatever crash landing. There's like this energy ghost of Magneto. I don't know how to describe it. Like escaping the pod.
This was a little bit of a jump the shark for me because he is reconstituting himself from nothingness, essentially.
Yeah, there's something is like minor foreshadowing, kind of not really spoiler for the very last episode of X-Men. You say jump the shark. These are power sets that I'm like, I'm not sure that they have, but the writers took like a stretch of liberty in extending. Because I don't think we talked about it before, but Fabian Cortez did mention when he like sucked Magneto's powers back out before he shot the pod into space, something about like you're too weak to even hold your atoms together or something, or your molecules together. And I was like, was that something he had to do before, I guess? Or is that just a general rule of physics for all the characters in these universes? It's like a Dr. Manhattan thing.
I don't know.
Where like you're able to control your molecules. So this, yeah, he's like spread apart, but he's starting to reconstitute himself or whatever.
Even in the most recent story, which is going on in the comics, AXE, so Avengers, X-Men, Eternals, he gets like shot through the chest and he's controlling his own magnetic field to replace his heartbeat, essentially.
Oh, shit.
That seems more plausible than him reconstituting himself from just a nothingness magnetic field to me.
Interesting. So, because it's like, I guess, magnetism and molecules and atoms, there's something. I'm not a physics guy. There's something there maybe, but anyway, so we just
like, I know there's iron in our blood, but there's not literally iron in every cell of your body.
Yeah.
If there is, tell us we're wrong.
Yeah. It's all the scientists listening to this podcast.
Those poor people.
Then back on the asteroid, Cortez is giving like this biblical villain speech. Again, there's a good number of like little cameos that broadcast out to the world, but I don't know if there's anybody like notable.
I feel like at that point it was people we had already seen. It wasn't anybody new between the earlier episodes and this one.
Yeah. Is it basically saying that like there's other people, humans and mutants and stuff that are seeing these broadcasts Cortez is putting out from Asteroid M. And then Amelia shows up while he's giving his broadcast with the tape. And then luckily they had a VCR there and plays it for everyone.
That's his broadcast station. I could totally see that being reasonable.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. He is broadcasting to the world.
Yeah.
So he has to have a legit broadcast setup to do that.
Well, so what was funnier to me was not just not that necessarily he had a broadcasting set up, is that this most advanced tech at the time still was just a VCR.
It really was. It really was. Look at control rooms at that time. Yeah. That was accurate, man.
Like, so funny.
For context, I didn't buy a DVD until I was a freshman in college. So, like literally 2000, 2001 was the first time I would have bought DVDs.
I guess that's fair, because I remember my first DVDs were in 1999, and that I may have been accelerated a little bit because at the time in high school I worked at Walmart in the electronics section.
Yeah.
And so there are so few DVDs you could fit them all in one front-facing wall display. So I think there may have been maybe 24 max.
I remember buying Goodfellas. In Goodfellas, you actually had to turn over the DVD.
I remember those.
Because it was too long to fit on a single side.
Yeah, and it's still like 480p or something like that. My first one, I believe, was Prince of Egypt.
I'm sorry.
I actually kind of like that movie. But especially at the time, because they were kind of rare to get because they were like $30 or $40.
Yeah, they were expensive.
I remember getting that one because I was like, okay, if I'm going to get something, I need something that looks nice, but also that everyone can watch. So it was either like that or The Matrix. I was like, you know what, Grandma, Grandpa, and my mom and dad probably aren't going to watch this Matrix, but the whole family can sit down and watch Prince of Egypt. So anyway.
So Amelia shows the tape of
VCR.
the security tape of him ejecting Magneto's pod.
Yeah, and Cortez immediately pulls the fake news. He's like, obviously, this is doctored footage.
Which we know the Shi'ar can doctor footage.
Yeah, but even then, I'm not sure if they doctored it, if it's just a reenactment,
Right. But also, even if they had a good editing suite, the VFX at that time, not super convincing.
Well, it's like that meme of people saying the moon landing was all CG, and then it shows like asteroids, and it's like the game Asteroids is like CG at the time.
Yeah. Yep.
So anyway, luckily the rest of the mutants on board Asteroid M aren't that dumb.
Yeah, they all turn on Cortez pretty quickly.
Which...
He starts crying, right?
Yeah. I kind of like seeing, though, because this is how you want to see things turn out, and we've learned in like real world circumstances don't always play out this way. Like people don't always believe real life evidence like in things, but the mutants do. They are like, all right, clearly this man's insane. Yep. They probably got enough context clues. Like he's been unhinged a few times now.
But the chicken shit crying is great. I love the visual of him like, oh no. Because have we seen a villain actually just like have everything turned on them so hardcore that they start crying?
I don't think
we've seen that yet.
And that kind of goes back to my thing of like, I think he was just a little too chicken shit for some stuff.
Right.
Even though he like ejected Magneto's pod out in the air and in space and everything, it's like that might have just been an impulsive, just, whatever. But he's not quite ready to be any sort of leader, I mean,
he sent a missile to Earth.
Yeah. So he's not thinking things through.
Yeah.
Speaking of not thinking things through, his solution for this moment is drop a grenade because that's going to work out in his favor. And then neither of us know who this person's name.
One of the acolytes.
But I put like Big Hand Lady.
Right.
She kind of has what Kamala Khan in current day MCU has. It was like a hard light situation.
Projection. Right. And then Wolverine does what this is where you knew Wolverine was an original recording for this episode. He makes a comment that she must be a handful on dates.
Yeah.
And I yelled at the TV.
Right. It's both a pun and possibly a sexual reference.
Again, Rod and I watch this show in very different ways.
I didn't think of that until now. Also, I'm like more aware of it now that John pointed it out so many times.
No wonder you grew up loving this show.
So Cortez is starting to run away, but apparently he thought that was going to be his like smoke bomb moment.
And he runs to the missile control.
Yeah, Amelia points out to everyone else like other secondary controls. Cortez goes to the secondary controls to try to arm the missiles. Byron tells them that there's still 210 operable.
Because there's specifically 16% have been disengaged.
Yeah. And good on Beast. Like he got through like 40 of them in that like short amount of time.
Yeah.
So
Beast is efficient, bro.
Beast is a beast.
Not going to say that.
Gambit shows up in time to stop Byron because Byron wasn't going to immediately do it. He was hesitating, but he wasn't not going to do it.
Well, he starts pushing back, and then Cortez basically pulls a gun up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Gambit shows up, but we have to remind you, Gambit's inhibited. He has the Genoshan collar on him. Amelia then smokes in, though, and steals the collar remote from Cortez to disarm Gambit's collar. But it's a little too late because the missiles do start launching anyway. Then we cut back to Beast in wherever the missile silos or whatever.
Yep.
And Beast is like, oh, this is not good. Time to get out of here. And so he leaves. Then we see all the missiles heading towards Earth, which is kind of reminiscent of like which X-Men movie was that when Magneto kind of did that? Was that the whole Cuban Missile Crisis thing?
Right. But also not too far off from what we just had 2 episodes ago when we had Sean on, because we had the Omega Red episode. Yeah. I mean, granted, it was 12 missiles and it was within the Earth's atmosphere, but it was just kind of funny because these aired so far apart from each other. And that was also the one we talked about was a fill-in episode. That was not actually originally supposed to be what happened in that episode. So they had to throw something together quick. So for them to have the two, literally the Blackbird shooting down missiles, this time just in space, that close to each other, I thought that was kind of not even ironic, it's just funny timing.
Yeah, I remember about the torpedoes from the submarine, though. Is like we said they were all like buddies because they all like convened on the surface of the ocean.
And then they shot up.
You good?
Yeah.
Right, cool, let's go. Like, is that how torpedoes work?
Yes.
They all just like...
Those were not torpedoes, Rod. Torpedoes stay underwater.
Oh, okay, so they're actually missiles.
They were missiles.
So the missiles that were all buddies, apparently college pals.
Yes. Yeah. I'm okay with you saying that non-sentient missiles can be friends with each other. I'm not okay with you saying missiles are torpedoes.
There you go. So at all 210 missiles are heading towards Earth. The Blackbird starts trying to shoot some of them down, but it's like too late. Like
it's just too many.
Then we just see the grand re-entrance of Magneto. He stops all the rest in one fell swoop, yells at Cortez, and then reveals that the Earth's magnetic